Climate change impacts are rising. It suffers you in many ways. It creates heat wave, wildfires, floods, storms, drought. We have to work to reduce climate disruption. Climate Channel is making awareness on it. They will cover in Climate Change Conference, COP9. Support us.
The show, welcome to the show of Climate TV channel, and we all know that Baku Climate Conference COP29 is just days around, just kind of about 7 to 10 days from now, and we are all eagerly waiting to see what's going to happen in Baku. A lot of us will be in Baku, and a lot of people will be watching from around the world. And today we are starting a special series, Baku and Beyond. And today's episode, we call it, Where is the Money? We all know that Baku Climate Conference is pegged as the finance COP. And the basic question comes up, where is the money? And we all have seen that there are several several calculations are coming up. How much money should be there? There are the G20 meeting talked about 1 trillion, and now Indian government also talked about 1 trillion. Some people are talking about 2 to 3 trillion. What is the realistic figure? UN has come up with something called at least 750 billion. So we need to see that where is this discussion going and how far that will be translated into actual action in Baku. We have seen more than a decade back in 2009, 2010, 100 billion was promised by the developed countries. And in that amount that remained a dream for most of the period. I have a great panel to discuss the whole agenda. I have with me Sanjoy Vashit, my good friend, Director of Climate Action Network South Asia. Sanjoy, welcome to the show. I have with me Farah Kabir. Farah Kabir is the Country Director of ActionAid Bangladesh and being very actively part of this whole process from Bangladesh side. And I have with me another very good friend of mine, Ranga Palwala. Ranga is he's been involved with the UNCCC process for, I believe, for about 15 years, and he's a kind of a permanent negotiator of Sri Lanka. And now he is he's a climate change policy expert with EU Switch Asia program. So welcome to the show. And let's start with Sanjoy. No more intro, straight to the question. Sanjoy, where is the money? How much money? What do we expect in Baku?
Well, that's what I think last 20 years of negotiation has always been about, Jayanta. I think one of the reasons why this COP is all about climate finance is because ambition is locked. Countries are reluctant, especially developing countries are reluctant to put forward any kind of ambition on adaptation, mitigation, and now loss and damage also, because we always started talking about finance later on. Even after Paris Agreement was agreed, ratified, and when countries were asked to raise their ambitions before Paris Agreement implementation started, there was still 3.6 degree temperature gap, right? Because nobody knew how much money will be there, especially when 100 billion per year that was supposed to start delivered from 2013 onwards or 14 onwards, countries could accomplish only in 2022. So there has been such a delay of 9 years that there was no money, and that's why ambition has been locked by developing countries, even developed countries also. There's a distrust. There is the fact that developing countries are leading mitigation. If you look at the UNEP emission gap report also. So where is money? Money, I think developed countries are shying away from their responsibilities. They have already managed to shift the mitigation burden on developing countries.
Sorry to interrupt you. Before, where is the money? The question is how much money? Realistically, there are a lot of figures floating around.
Yeah.
Realistically, what do you feel is the realistic amount that can come up perhaps in Baku?
Well, as per Cancer's demand, we think 1.4 trillion per year grant, not investment and all that. They could be separate, but 1.4 trillion that's what LDCs have also put as a position, should be there. It is possible to raise this kind of money. And there are various sources, innovative sources that has been identified and that has been there being discussed also. So 1.4 trillion is something that may be able to help save millions of people suffering from adaptation and mitigation.
And when you say 1.4, you are adding up all parts. You are adding up mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage,
yes,
all components together. And you are saying that mostly the public finance.
Yes.
Are you excluding the private finance from it? You are saying only 1.4 trillion or all kind of finance?
Yes. Our not calculations, our assessment is that if it is 1.4 trillion, there will be less money for mitigation because investments will flow into mitigation. But for adaptation, loss and damage, public grants, public money need to be there.
Grant. Fine. Sanjay, I'll come to from where it will come. But before that, let me take the question to Farah Kabir first and then to Ranga. And I request both of you to unmute yourself because the to and fro sometimes gets disturbed. So, Farah Kabir, Didi, what's your take? How much you feel the money, realistic money, can come at Baku? What's your position, both as ActionAid International and also from your point of view? You have been part of the process for a long, long time.
I'll try not to be bleak and depressed. We haven't seen the money. And as we know that we got quite excited with the loss and damage announcement. And there was supposed to be that fund. Even this July in Azerbaijan, they have announced what they're calling the Climate Finance Action Fund. So they come up with new packaging. And this fund is supposed to be a public-private partnership fund. It is supposed to invest in developing countries, contributions from fossil fuel producing countries and companies. Now, if you ask me, that fund can come because ActionAid has done the research and we have produced a report where we have shown that over $6 trillion dollars are being given as subsidies to the fossil fuel company. So from Kansa, we are saying $1.4 trillion. You can see that it would still be just 25% of what the subsidies are. Exactly. So it is about political will and the intention. And this CFAF fund is supposed to be agreement guarantees for small and medium-sized renewable energy producers. You also want to keep the 1.5 target. You want to move to renewables and just energy. So this, in theory, looks like a way to go ahead if Azerbaijan action takes place. But we are yet to see the funds into the loss and damage fund. We're yet to see, we've been asking for about 300, we're asking for 50% adaptation, 50% mitigation, because we saw that nothing was coming. So these conversations happen at the high profile. Now, in a country like Bangladesh, from May to September, we have had 5 rounds of disasters. Just May to September. I'm not even giving you the full year picture. Floods, repeated floods, waterlogging, salinity intrusion. So
we know we are this part of the border. We are this part of the border also experience the same thing. So
exactly. So it's not for us. It's not about the 2030 target. It's not about the 2050 target. It's right now. Right. And this financing would make a huge difference, because the developing countries are asked to be resilient, asked to do anticipatory planning, preparation. We're doing all that. But when your emissions are not reducing, when globally warming is going on, so how do you, it's a contradiction across the globe. So coming back to your question, we as a country, we spend whatever little we have, 16 billion additional funds to respond to these disasters, then to be able to build up our resilience, to do anticipatory work, to go into renewable, it needs more. So this Azerbaijan COP, the COP29, if they are serious, we want to see the action.
Absolutely. I think I'll come to that again. But Ranga, one thing we often face, this discussion always been going around where the COPs are on, not only the quantity of finance, but also the quality of finance. The private finance and the public finance, and there are a lot of double counting being also talked about. So How you see this? This is a finance COP. So not only the quantity, also the quality of finance need to be kind of spelled out clearly. How you see this Baku COP going on that count?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, Jayanta. I think the NCQG negotiations, we have seen the NCQG is not just the number, how much of money we need, but there have been different pillars have been discussed. One is the quantity, of course, but we also discussed about who's going to contribute to this, right? We also discuss about the time frame when you achieve, as Sanjay mentioned, for 100 billion target, we waited until 2022, according to the OECD report. But there are some other reports saying that, well, we have still not achieved the 100 billion target too. The time frame, the covered, the themes, and also we have seen there are discussions about the overall scope, like in Paris Agreement, it's not only under the Article 9, but also the Article 2.1 need to be considered, and some of the transparency aspects as well. And at the same time, there are some discussions about, as Sanjay and Farah mentioned, how to have like sub-thematic goals, how much of money you are going to allocate for adaptation and loss and damage as well. I think one of the greatest shift, if you see from the 100 billion to the NCQG, is that we have moved a long way, of course, in terms of the discussions. That is, now we are talking a lot about loss and damage, because as Farah correctly mentioned, we know the demands and we know the need, etc. So it's not just the number. NCQG is not just the quantified goal. It has so many other elements. But it's interesting to see. Of course, we have seen the co-chairs, the option report, and there are certain suggestions on this. But I think NCQG is going to be a very sticky negotiation process during the COP29, because around this there will be a lot more things will depend. As we know, next year we all, due to the NDC 3.0, need to come out, and some of the countries are still saying that it's all depending on how the external support is going to be. But anyway, as you asked about the quality is quite important. I think there are certain things, it's not only under the NCQG, but the whole process. We have been discussing about certain things about finance in terms of quality. One is about the accessibility, from where you get money and how the easy the process are. We have seen, for example, in recent past, let's take Green Climate Fund, for example. How many direct access entities are there for developing countries? And why is that? Of course, there have been support, but still the process have been delayed. And so there are some direct access entities without a single project being implemented for Green Climate Fund. So whatever said and done, there are certain issues with that in terms of the accessibility, not only from the Green Climate Fund, but others. So it's not only just having an arbitrary target, but as well as looking at these aspects.
Absolutely.
Because I think what we need to look at is the science-based targets. We all know, for example, 2 degree, we all know 2 degree is not a scientific based one. It's just a political target. And 100 billion is not a scientific based. It's an arbitrary number came somewhere during the negotiations. And we don't need to have another arbitrary number, 1 trillion or whatever, but it needs to be science-based. And this is one angle that's been discussed about. Rather than we keep, of course, as a quantified goal, but there should be some sort of a review process, and there should be a process of updating the target based on the needs and the realities. So it's a composite one. I think it's not only the quantified goal.
Absolutely. Before I come to Sanjay, I'm going to take the discussion forward what Ranga had just said, but very quickly, Ranga's discussion provoked me. Any kind of figure you realistically feel? See, Cancer has talked about 1.4 trillion. Government of India talked about 1 trillion. So there are a lot of figures going around. So realistically, considering the wars being going on, that being put up as something alibi and all that, do you see? I'm not requesting you to say a specific figure, but do you see this $100 billion being substantially increased during the kind of Baku coppers? Ranga, just what do you feel? There will be. Do you feel that this figure will be substantially increased?
$100 billion target, definitely I would see. So as I see now, it's like it's hovering around 1 trillion.
About 1 trillion.
In terms of the numbers, because we see the UNCTAD report saying that it's about 1.5 trillion, if I'm not mistaken, and that some estimates are there even coming as 3 trillion and stuff.
Okay.
And even some of the developed countries have mentioned it as 750 billion or something, so which is close to a trillion. So I think looking at the negotiation history, I think it will be as a quantity, it will be hovering around 1 trillion. That's
what
why
I'm saying. The 7 days before the COP, as an expert, your expectation, Farah ji, what your take on that? How much amount do you feel will it be substantially increased?
Well, I think we are at such a point in the crisis that food security of many countries have been severely affected, and repeated disasters because of the global warming, health issues have been added. If you see the dimension of the impacts, so I would like to believe that the 1 trillion discussion is going to be locked. But a part of me is cynical because, as I said, from Paris Agreement to Baku, we have not seen the shift. And the problem is we have found there's a lot of double counting. Number one, because even ODA and bilaterals are being packaged as a part of this climate financing. Secondly, the institutions, World Bank, IMF, and all are giving more loans. And if you look at the LDCs across Africa, across many other parts of Asia, you will find that the loan numbers are going on. Bangladesh has only managed over all these years to get two projects funded from the Green Climate Fund. A country that is so vulnerable. I'm just giving you as an example. So I'm sure there are many countries where the intention and the availability is always questionable. And they're always talking about the compliance and other issues, but the access and making it available has not gone in parallel. And when you talk about the loss and damage fund, it cannot have the same architecture. We know it doesn't have the same architecture. We have been doing so much advocacy and so on, but we have to see, to believe that those funds will be accessible.
Okay. Actionable is a very important word and the operative words. Sanjay, the same thing that, see, not only the fund, as somebody who is being representing civil society groups, so many organizations across South Asia, being a vital cog in the wheel, how you see this, not only the quantity, also the quality of finance. And for example, we all discussed last time that how the adaptation finance has been kind of shifted away. And the whole focus is on mitigation, because mitigation brings market, mitigation brings the return of interest. So how do you see this whole ball game of finance being played around during the Baku?
That has been the major problem, Jayanta. I mean, as Ranga also mentioned, that quality is something that we need to look at. The fact that climate impact has multiplied many times now. On the other side, because there has not been a quality money, the adaptation intervention has not been enough and people are suffering. So even if you put quantity with less quality, the outcome will be very less. That is our fear. And that is why anything less than trillion will be a problem for negotiations. I think this upcoming COP is trying to resolve or address one major issue, which will have very positive bearing in next negotiations onwards, because if climate finance is resolved, our fear is that even, we, as Farah said, cynical about the numbers. Our fear is that they may put numbers, but then they will make it a business case for themselves. They'll give money and they'll try to make profit out of it. So people are, it's like, insurance company, that's what they do. But insurance company at least give you an insurance before, charging a premium, but they have created a problem and now they will give you money to make profit out of it. And that is a problem for us. So without quality, which is basically public grant for adaptation and loss and damage, the numbers, even 1 trillion will not be enough. And as institutional frameworks through which we developing countries receive money are unutilized or are not equipped enough to receive that money and spend it. In fact, the criteria that has been set are not easy to be fulfilled unless you channelize that money through multilateral organization. That's a problem also.
Sanjay, you see the developed country as a counter strategy, bring about pressure that the developing economies like China, India, South Africa also open their purse. Do you see that happen during the negotiation, putting pressure
Well,
on developing economies
well,
for
as
for
voluntary
fund?
targets, I think they should, because not because they are a culprit, but more because they can contribute and provide relief as a global community. They should, but the problem is if there are efforts to increase the contributors base, that will have a problem on G17 and China split, and that's a problem. So the fact that adding more of countries which are developing countries but emerging economies in contributing NCQG, we have to bring in the differentiation very clearly. As of now, differentiation is not there. So if US put in money, or EU put in money, and India put in money, India will also be seen as a culprit that you must have also caused a problem. That's why you are giving money, and that's a problem for developing countries.
In fact, the series of reports those are coming up in the last few weeks, showing that emission gap report. And in
Yeah,
fact, to fill up that emission gap, a lot
yeah,
of countries to kind of execute their NDCs need
yeah,
support,
yeah,
need financial
yeah,
support. So
yeah.
unless that
Jayanta,
money is made available, the
yeah,
whole thing goes for a kind of a
yeah,
difficult time.
yeah. Jayanta, I
And
can
it's
quote one example. When in 2010 Cancun COP, short-term finance for 3 years, 30 billion was agreed, and 100 billion per year after 3 years was agreed. Then India said they will not take any money from 30 billion. And that was the kind of a contribution that let that money go to the developing countries, small and developing
right,
countries, because
right,
even we are vulnerable, equally vulnerable, but I think we can handle our vulnerability while this money need to go to them. That could be one way.
right. Now, now let us discuss about this some external factors which can influence this whole issue. Ranga, the US election is round the corner, and everybody is keeping the finger crossed. I still remember that after that Copenhagen COP, I think Marrakesh COP. In Marrakesh COP, when Donald Trump first became the president, and nobody expected at that point of time to for Donald Trump to win. And I can still remember when I reached Marrakesh, was kind of having a dialogue with various political leaders. They were shell shocked, and for 2 3 days, nobody was in a position to respond that how this whole process can go on. Then we all know that how Trump responded with the global climate negotiation. So again, an election is around the corner, and it's a very close fight. Ranga, for example, if Trump comes into power in US, how you see this whole money, everything, how it goes?
Let's count down for 4 years. I think that's what we did in from Marrakesh too, right? I think sorry to just neutralize this idea. I think we should forget about what's happening in the US elections, because from the climate change perspective, I think nothing has happened in the
Yeah.
US elections. You can say you will pull out from the Paris Agreement and stuff, and we know it's coming back. But whether US is in the Paris Agreement or not, it hasn't create any big difference in terms of the overall emissions or overall the impact on the economy or anything, unfortunately. And I think what we need to focus is about how to make sure that the climate policies are implemented. But on the other hand, I see if Trump comes to the power, if it's a big thing, I'm telling from my personal capacity here, there's a high chance that US might again going out of Paris Agreement, of course. But at the same time, of course, there will
Right.
be some factors within US will still trying to get US back into to one. But at the same time, there will be other parties will see how to stop gap the whatever the finance flow coming from US into this, because that's a huge area too. I think whatever the results in US happen, of course, the geopolitics in the world is changing, and there will be both positives and negatives. But I think let's try to work with the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is how to put it.
The world has to respond to that situation, whatever happens here. And Farah, also the issue of the wars happening around the world. There are two major wars are happening for a long, long time, and many feel that may be the alibi for developed country not to shell out the money that should have been there. So how do you see that? And also, I really would like to know, because now Bangladesh is having a different political constitution. The Hasina government has gone, and there's youthful uprising, and now there's a new government under Professor Yunus. So how do you see? Also, Professor Yunus is supposed to go to Baku. That's what we are hearing. So what's happening in Bangladesh on the climate front, and how you see the policy of the present government vis-a-vis the policy of the Hasina government?
To respond to your first question, I echo what Ranga was saying, and also, I think the US has not really been a major contributor or hasn't taken action that can be defined as pro-climate justice. So I leave that there. Bangladesh 2.0, as we call it, after our student people's movement and revolution. So, we have now an interim arrangement, an interim government. And in the interim government has about 21, 22 advisors, and then there are the task force. The interim government is very pro. If you look at who our present environment and water advisor is, Syed Rizwana Hassan, she is globally known for as an environmentalist and an activist. So her positions on related to environment, pollution, climate is very clear and strong. And she's taking action on the ground in terms of Bangladesh, and the other global actors have approached them. Yes, Dr. Yunus is going to the conference, all things remaining same. So far, we know that he will be attending the high-level panel and the meetings with the global leaders. So that is still very much on the agenda. What has happened this time is the civil society groups, we were able to not only develop our CSO position paper, we managed to have those dialogues with the present advisor and the ministry, and to put forward our asks. So the ministry, the change is the ministry or the bureaucracy and the advisors are now looking at it as Bangladesh's interest. It's not about CSO versus government, or, there is less tension on that front. And so there have been consultation with the CSOs, with the youth groups, with other groups. So that's a shift. And the position paper is being of the government is influenced. So we hope at the negotiations this will be reflected. But as we all know, one country by itself doesn't, except for those 7, Annex 1 countries, they can't influence or bring back the expected outcomes. So there will have to be the grouping or the lobbying from the LDC group, the vulnerable group, the island groups, all the different groupings that exist there, and they together need to position. But what we have also seen previously is the Annex 7 members, they try to do bilateral arrangements. Sorry. And sometimes our negotiations are not strong. Sorry. We hope to see. Yeah, I'll just go and get some water while you continue. Yeah. Give me a second.
Sanjay, very quickly, this is geopolitics.
Climate Channel, a Canadian